Hi everybody, this is a brief video as an introduction to regular expressions. So sometime about a week ago, someone made a post about all of their Vim tips that they'd picked up so far on their journey, and I made a, I think, fairly well received comment on how to use regular expressions, but I think that it warrants a little bit more discussion than what I could put into one post. So for anyone who's trying to get started in regular expressions, it's a little bit daunting, I suppose. If you go do a Google search for Vim regular expressions, there's a Vim Tips 101 page that looks a lot like this. And it's very thorough, but in my opinion, it's a little bit heavy for brand new users. So rather than try to understand exactly what's inside this entire document and kind of try to work it through front to back, what I'd like to do is show you the typical use cases of substitute in Vim as well as sort, which is where I think you'll use regular expressions the most, and then talk about a very small subset of what's in this box here for the meta characters. So in my personal experience, with 5 of these out of this whole set, well, I guess slightly more than that. It's 3 and their complements, which would be 6, and then 2 other ones, so I guess 8 total. You can do about 90% of the things that most normal humans are going to want to try to do with Vim regular expressions. So to get us started here, I have a file that I made earlier this month where I was trying to, book flights to Phoenix from Indianapolis. And I think this has all the pieces in it that we may want to deal with. So the first thing that you'll want to do with substitutions probably is the global search and replace. So this is actually quite easy in Vim. So if you issue into your kind of command prompt here, your colon that gets us into command line mode, and you say %s, which is all the lines in the file substitute, we can do something really simple like substitute all of the cases where you see IND with RSW, for example. And so that's the sort of easiest replace, and probably everybody can do that. Before I go any further, actually, I want to show you this. So if you don't have it, you should really strongly consider this traces.vim plugin. So I have a lot of plugins. I like the minimal strategy, but there's a lot of stuff that I like to try to use. This traces is probably the most important plugin, or at least it's in the top 5 most important plugins of all the ones I have. And what it does is it shows you when you do search and replace, especially, what you're matching and what your substitutions will be before you press the enter key. So this can save you a lot of time, a lot of troubleshooting as you're trying to learn to use regular expressions. So that being said, there are a lot of other ways that you can use search and replace. So one that probably everybody knows here is if you enter your visual line mode and you say select me this block and you say substitute now all of the cases where you find IND with RSW, it will do that. And then if you do it again, for example, if you press Q and then colon, you can go edit this and say, actually, what I want is that, but also change everywhere you see Phoenix to be LAX. And you'll see now I have RSW to LAX. So this is the kind of easiest demonstration of search and replace. So that range you can do a lot of different ways. The first one being obviously the kind of whole file with %. You can specify when you're picking a range here and you look at it, automatically says, what have you selected with apostrophe less than and apostrophe greater than. You can also, as you might expect, specify a particular range. So I could say if I'm on line 4 and then 5 lines below that on line 9, I could say on lines 5 to 9, give me a substitute of, 4 to 9, substitute Indianapolis for RSW. Sure. Why not? And you can do that. So the other thing that's a little bit maybe peculiar to substitute is it only does the first match. So if we leave aside the text here and we say consider all the places where you find a 0, let's replace it with a 1. So you notice that traces now highlights only the first match. So there are a lot of, like on relative line 2 up there, you can see we have a lot of extra zeros. There are flags that you can issue, for example, G, to do all of the matches per line. This is pretty useful if you're programming because you might have multiple instances of a variable on the same line. But you might also want to give confirmation each time, which you can do with C, the C flags. That's for confirm. So you say, yes, I want to replace that one. No. Yes, replace that one. No. Yes, replace that one. And then when you're done, you can either get all the way through the match set, or you can press Q, and you'll be done, and those substitutions will be done. So that's the briefest overview and maybe the most basic way of using the substitute command. There are special characters for substituting where you don't necessarily want to specify exactly what your match is by typing it out. So for example, I may want to say, find me in this document all the places where there is a word character. So this is anything that's a letter and not a space, basically. So space characters with S and digits with D. If you want to match a set of these, for example, you can specify how many. So I might want to match 4 of them at a time. So now you'll see I have just groups of 4. I might also want to say, just give me if there's 1 or more /+. So this is going to be all the cases where you have 1 or more digits on a line. There is also, let's say if we did match the spaces, find me all the places where there are 0 or more spaces. So that's effectively everywhere. And you'd say, well, why do I want to do that? Well, the answer from my crappy formatting here is, let's say I have ORD to Phoenix or Phoenix to Indiana, because that occurs. I could say any place where you find Phoenix followed by 0 or more spaces, let's replace that with RSW dash. And then you'll see that makes my formatting a little bit nicer. I'm actually going to do another one that way to make this a little bit even more clear. So now I have everybody formatted the same way, where up here I had 1 space, and down here, Phoenix to Indianapolis, I had 0 spaces. So those are the magic 8. There's S and capital S, which is match me space characters, which includes your spaces, your tabs, and new lines. There are the digit characters 0 through 9, or not digit characters, which would be capital D, lowercase d being the digit characters. And then you have your word or not word characters, which is basically anything that's not a space. So those are your sort of most useful substitution commands, and generally how to use them. Of course, there are other things that are useful about regular expressions. For example, let's say that I want to replace all of the cases where I have American space 1 with something. So I might do %s American space 1, and I want to replace that with American space 2. So that's an okay way of solving this problem, I suppose, but it's a little bit clunky. What you really want is, well, I'm not going to tell you what you really want yet. One of the things you may want is /paren, which is start a capture group. If you use very magic, which is this /v, we assume everything is magical, but let's just assume that it's not here, and I'll do one that's magical here in a second. So I could say American space and close it, so there's my match. And then I would say 1, because I want to match that 1. Or actually, let's do it this way. Let's match the zeros, because there are some of those. And I want to replace those with the same thing, American space, but I already told Vim that I wanted to remember that. So I would do /1. And now it knows American space, and I can say, I don't know, follow that with a 3. So now I've gone from American space 0 to American space 3, but I only had to type American 1 time, which is great. This is really useful. You'll see in an example I'm about to give you when you want to keep some bit of your match, but you don't necessarily maybe know what it is or how it's going to be formatted, or it might be different from one line to the next. But in this case, what you really actually want to do is you would tell Vim, I want to start on the lines that say American. But I don't want to start the match until right here, ZS. And then I'll say match me a digit, and then end my match, and let's replace that with, I don't know, a 3, let's say. So without even pressing enter, Traces is showing me what this is doing. I've told Vim by way of my pattern that I want American followed by this /D, but this /SZS, excuse me, and /ZE say match, or rather do the changes only to what matches inside of those triggers. So that's the general useful set. The other thing that I could do is specify the range using regular expressions, which is also kind of interesting. So I could say, give me all the lines that start with IND, or have IND, well, okay, let's do it actually starts with IND. And then let's match, let's do a substitute for a space. Zero or more, and one of those. Oh man, here I've messed this up again. Okay, let's do a space there, slash, space dot. Well, okay, I don't ever do that. There's, I'm sure, a reason to do it. It's written in this ranges thing on how you go find those. That's ranges with the G command. You can read up on power of G. It's super useful to do things that way. So here's what that kind of is. We were supposed to do that, and then S, and then space, I guess, and then it would have worked. But rather than belabor this example that maybe is going to affect you or maybe not, let's do something that's a little bit more maybe useful for everybody. So if I open a new terminal and I look at my ZSH history, so if you have bash or ZSH or really any other terminal, you have somewhere on your computer a history file that has the list of all the commands that you've issued. And generally there's a limit to how large this can be, and you may have set that limit or you might not have. But really what you want, unless you're trying to preserve a particular set of context for any of your commands, is you want to be able to autocomplete those things. So you want the minimum set of kind of non-repeating commands in this file. So we can do that in 3 steps with Vim, and this is one of the things I showed in my example that I made the post last week. So what I can do is I can first say sort, and sort uses regular expressions. So it by default sorts on whatever follows the regular expression you give it. If you run it with no regular expression, it starts sorting on the beginning of the line. So if I start sorting on the colon and I go to this semicolon here, now I can sort all the commands, and you can see, for example, like generating my screencasts here, I've got several runs of this screencast command, and I really only want one of them. So how do I down select on these? Well, I can use the substitute command to do this. It's a little bit complicated, and maybe G does a better job doing this, but let's work through it just as a good example. So I could say to Vim, match on all the lines. Let's do this in a very magic way. We're going to start a capture group, and we know that every line starts with a colon. It has some more characters, and then a semicolon, and then it closes. So this is the date stamp, and I'm not really concerned with this right now, but I know that I need to capture it later so that I can have date stamps on whatever remains in this file just for consistency. And then I start another capture group, and I would say give me anything that was a command until the end of the line, and then a new line. And so that's going to give me, sorry, I don't want that. I actually meant to say dot star. Yes, I want one or more characters, or rather 0 or more of any character until the end of the line, and then a new line. But now I want to remove the extra thing. So here you see like I have 6 of these ECs, which is how I edit my Vim configuration. So how do I get at that? Well, I would say this matches a line that I want to keep, right? It's got a date stamp, it matches a command, but then I want to find all of the subsequent commands and capture those as part of this pattern. So what are those like? Well, I know that they start with a colon on the following line from whatever command I'm on. They have some more characters and a semicolon. And then they have whatever was in this second thing, the command, the capture group 2. So if I /2 here, now you can see I've got all the duplicates highlighted. Well, what do I actually want to keep? I want to keep the date stamp, which is /1. And then I want to keep whatever the command was up to the end of the line and the carriage return, because I want to keep everything on its own line. /2. So now you can see up there at relative line 2 here that there is only one of these ECs. There's only one now of the screencast. There's only one of all of these other files. And I don't need to do /G because I know this is already by line and it's doing the entire line. So if I press enter here, that gives me only one of each one. And now I can run sort with no arguments to sort on the date stamp. And then you can see the last couple of things that I called here. I save that and quit before I run any other commands that are going to write to the history, and we're done. So this has been a brief overview to regular expressions. Some things that were covered are how to select ranges for substitution, what the meta characters are, or rather super characters for word, space, and digits, how to do capture groups, how to specify the start and end of a match, and then a little bit of a practical example with a failure to launch on how to select ranges using regular expressions, which you can do, and somebody else I'm sure will correct me in the comments. So thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.